Well, hello there, Rolf. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Oh,
Thank you.
good,
Hope
good.
you do. Hope you're doing fantastic as well.
Oh, well, I'm doing fantastic now that I'm going to have this first kick off this first Immersed with Allison with the famous Rolf Brink. So,
Oh, that made me blush, Addison.
oh, I know this one. I'm going to make you blush. I'm going to make you blush again for a second. So, obviously, you have this amazing resume for liquid and immersion cooling technology that everyone knows about. Like, if you know anything about this industry, you know Rolf. And so, of course, you are the founder and CEO of PROMERSION. Which helps the growth of liquid and immersion cooling in the industry. You're also the founder of Asperitas, and did you say that right? Asperitas. Yeah. Okay.
Asperitas. That's
Okay.
right.
Good. Also, one of the leaders for immersion cooling as well, and drum roll, the OCP Cooling Environments Project lead. So for immersion cooling, and so been involved with OCP since 2017. Is that right? About
Yeah, well, yeah. Around the time, I was one of the founding members of the original Advanced Cooling Solutions environment, together with Jessica Goldbrand, Steve Mills, and various other co-conspirators to set up the advanced cooling tracks, which have now grown into the cooling environments. And we're actually celebrating our 5-year anniversary this year at the Global Summit.
I love that. Well, and I read that the Cooling Environments, immersion project is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like one of the most attended uh, work streams and everything
Um,
for OCP.
yeah, I can correct you on that. It's not one of, it's the.
See, I love
uh, from what I
it.
understand from the foundation as well, is that immersion is the biggest project within OCP, and we have the highest amount of work streams within the immersion project. And obviously, I'm going to refuse to claim credits for it myself, because this is only possible due to all the volunteer work that all the work streams.
He's frozen in Austin. So of course we have a little technical glitch, but we're back. Hopefully that's only a little bump. But go ahead. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, so I was made immersion being the biggest community out there. It's not to my credit. Uh, it's not possible without the volunteer leadership that we have. It's just extensive. We have the largest amount of work streams within OCP. There's a lot of volunteers driving it, and all of this is not possible without the active contributions and active participation of the entire industry in this community. So it's thanks to the engagement of the entire industry that this is such a large and impactful environment.
Oh yeah, it takes a village, isn't that what they say? So and
Yeah.
I love our village. I really do. I'll tell you what. I don't know if you remember talking to me way back in 2018. We had a call. Someone gave me your name, and I researched you, and you had a very nice call. And I'm sure I was very annoying at the time because I was picking your brain. And so yeah, and actually, you're the one that said about OCP at the time, and so literally, I've hung on every word. I think I started with the fluid group. I don't know what led me to that, but I was started with the fluid group, and then I kind of osmosis from there, and now I'm like in about 10 different work streams, and it's hard to, I don't know how you keep up because you're in almost all of them.
I try to be in as many of them as possible
Yeah,
to make sure that everything is able to advance. But
doing important work. I love it. I love it.
but
Well,
it's good fun to do, right? It's good fun
yeah,
to do.
no, I'll tell you, it really is. It's so exciting for me, and maybe I just nerd out, honestly, in all the information, and I used to joke around about the advanced cooling facilities. I say it's riveting conversation about pipes, and then it gets really exciting, and they talk about threads. but seriously, I absolutely love it, you know, so gotta laugh, right? So, well, this kind of leads into actually my first question for Immersed with Allison that will be on in Mission Critical Magazine. I'm so excited about that. So, tell us a bit that you haven't already said about OCP's mission statement, how you were first introduced, and as well as your role for the immersion community. So,
Oh, sure. That's part of a way back machine.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, my first exposure to OCP was actually at a time that I wasn't really taking OCP that seriously. Open source hardware was basically what it was all about at the time.
Mhm.
Um, I considered it at the time, I thought it was something similar to open source software forums where people were developing open software that was never going to be mainstream, like Unix and Linux. Sorry for all the people that are offended by me not stating that, by me stating that it's not mainstream. But um, at the time, I had some conversation with John Laban, who is very well known globally as one of the more outspoken advocates of open compute. And it wasn't until the first scoping session that took place in Silicon Valley about, hey, should we have a look at liquid cooling when I heard of that session and what had been discussed in that, that immediately struck me as something. Okay, this now it's getting relevant. Why is that? Because there's some good reasons, and this feeds right into the mission statement of OCP, right? I've got it here on my screen. I'll just read it out loud. We believe that openly sharing ideas, specifications, and other intellectual property is the key to maximizing innovation and reducing complexity in tech components. There is so much that I agree with in that single simple mission statement. You have to, if you look back at the start of liquid cooling as an industry,
Mhm.
it was cutthroat. Everybody was fighting over dominance, and companies were pointing at each other, mostly in a negative sense.
Yeah.
There was always a lot of mystery and secrecy behind what companies were doing. At the time, I already had started Asperitas, and one of the things that I thought that I considered during the business plan stage was, if this industry is going to be successful, first of all, we're going to have to unite.
Yeah.
And make sure that we stop throwing mud at each other, and I say we because I was suddenly part of that industry. But one of the first things I did before going to market, before becoming public, was to reach out to all the to various CEOs of existing companies and just have a conversation, inform them that I was going to come to market, that Asperitas was going to exist at some point, what we were going to do, what we were planning to do, and that I would that I had the ambition to have some kind of a forum between the various parties uh, uh, to achieve some mutual, to progress some mutual interesting, mutual interest topics. Because people, end users, potential end users, potential customers were basically put off by all the risks that were being thrown out there. Well, if you engage with that party, your facility is going to blow up, right? Or you're going to be having this nightmarish environment if you go with that party, right? So
You're gonna have a leak.
that is something that just had to stop, because nobody's going to get even into your technology if you're the one who's spewing that about the rest. Because part of this, one of the more important things that I saw in that, hey, we're going to need to get rid of the mystery behind it. Before anybody can even think of adopting liquid cooling, people need to have that understanding, and they cannot just get it from conversations under NDA with a potential supplier, because they will not engage, because they will not have that that upfront comfort that the inherent technology is something that might be of use to them. So that's where OCP really comes in, because one of the things I saw as a great way of dealing with some of that mystery is to liberate some of the confidential materials that most of the parties were coming from. And I decided to do that by leading by example, just sharing stuff, insights about material compatibility on what these fluids actually are, how they work, how they function. And I saw OCP as the perfect platform to do that because of that mission statement, because that is so much in line with what a new industry needs to evolve towards in a direction of something that can be called mainstream.
Yeah, no,
right, and that's so that's where I decided to jump on it with OCP. I had already authored a white paper about how liquid cooling technology should be coexisting with these pillars based on indirect liquid cooling, which is door heat exchanger, cold plate, and immersion, and having a coexistent existence where they could live and interoperate with each other within a facility ecosystem. That's something that I'm still very passionate about today. That all these liquid technologies, it's not about who's going to be the winner or which technology will be the one technology that rules them all. That will never exist. It's because all the technologies have their pros and cons. And even though I had just created an immersion company myself, I've never told anybody that immersion is a solution for all.
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel is very important. And even one brand of immersion will never be the solution for all of the immersion space. And that's kind of key to how I look at the industry, and also how I connect with the OCP mission statement.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's the most thing that I love about the OCP community for immersion is everyone comes together, checks their egos at the door, plays in the same sandbox. So for me, like, I just love that. I really do. And it has given me such a different perspective over the years. I have a fun story about John Laban.
John Laban, yeah.
John Laban. See, that sounds better because I'm like John Laban, my Texas accent, right? So in 2019, I don't know what happened, but I posted something or maybe a video or something. He chimed in and we had a conversation. It was great. And he said, Allison, if you understand the connection between immersion cooling and scope 3 emissions, you will be the one-eyed queen in the land of the blind. Wait a minute. Let's just think about this statement, first of all, because I'm like, is this a European thing? Because I love this. So I have never forget. I'm the one-eyed queen in the land of the blind. I love it, and I'm gonna own it and wear it, and that's kind of what osmosis me into the ambassadors, because I was almost the one-eyed queen, but I was like, nah, that kind of sounds a little sketchy sometimes. So I went with ambassadress. So yeah, but he's such a leader in the industry for sustainability and liquid cooling and immersion cooling.
Yeah.
I love that. So leads me to my second question. So why do you believe immersion cooling is important for green, sustainable data centers? So give me your answer to that.
Well, it's first of all, it's obviously a very good question, and it really comes down to the overall efficiency that immersion brings. So, just for the record, I'm not necessarily pro immersion versus other liquid cooling technologies, right? So cold plate and door heat exchanger are all very important technologies. But when it comes to the energy efficiency, the holistic approach that immersion brings with absorbing 100% of the heat generated by IT equipment, basically 100% of the electrical consumption converts into heat. And if that heat is only generated within the fluid, it means the fluid is absorbing 100% of the heat of the power loss, of the power consumption. Then it comes down to the efficiency in which you can capture that into an alternate circuit to transport the heat away from the data hall towards something else. That combined with the high temperature, the elevated temperature capabilities that immersion brings, which is similar to cold plate, but then in the context of the holistic approach, the super efficiency. That gives so much opportunity for facilities to become energy neutral, or at least approximate energy neutral operation from power in equals the thermal output of the facility that can be controlled or harvested in other means like heat reuse or with super efficient cooling installations that don't require evaporation or compression cooling. And it's that holistic nature that gives it its flair, its relevance in the industry. Doesn't mean that everything should become immersed. No, absolutely not. And this is something that the industry needs. I think the time is ripe for the industry to start getting educated on that front as well. You hear this. You very often hear this argument like, "Hey, liquid is overtaking air, or we need to get rid of air cooling." No. That's not the discussion that should take place. Air cooling will never ever disappear. And it should never ever disappear either. This is about enriching the palette of choices, of solutions that can help contribute to a more effective operation, that can help deal with the higher chip densities, the higher thermal loads. And you have to mix and match these technologies to address and to achieve the goals that you have as a business, but also that society needs you to achieve.
Hybrid.
And that's really where it becomes where it comes in being a fundamental shift for the data center industry. It's the diversity of technologies that are going to be deployed, that will need to be deployed in data centers, versus the air versus liquid polarization, right? And that's but yeah, immersion is the most holistic one, also the most complicated one to work with, because of the fundamental different approach, the fundamental different way of work, both in facility management and day-to-day maintenance, installation, for site planning. So yeah, it's still got a road to travel.
Yeah, I love the hybrid word. I've kind of latched onto that word over the years, and so I like a lot of these situations where they're kind of blending. They have air, maybe they have cold plate, and they have immersion, and I do love that. But I always say we're changing mindsets. So you kind of have to wipe maybe what you've been doing for 40 years and think differently. And so I think that's I feel like if we're going to talk about a hurdle, that's, I think, to me, that's one of the first hurdles I mentioned with immersion. It's just kind of changing the way we think about things. So.
No, I tend to think it's mostly something that people need to get used to. Electric vehicles is a parallel that I very commonly use, simply because it is such a striking resemblance. Remember about 15 years ago, people were saying that electric vehicles will never happen because you need charging stations. You can never charge a car quickly. You can never do this, and there's a ceiling for that. And there's whereas as soon as people started getting used to the idea of electric vehicles, the whole principle that when you leave your house, you got a full gas tank. You don't have a gas station at your home, but you do have an electrical installation at your home, right? So you can so you don't need to charge on the way unless you're dealing long distances, and long distances you're going to need to have a lunch break or a coffee break. And nowadays you can fully charge or charge up your car to about 80% in 15 minutes. So that's about the time you need for a quick cup of coffee, a toilet break, and then all of a sudden your car is ready to go again, right? So the people were at the start of such a paradigm shift like we've seen 15 years ago with electrical vehicles. We're
Mhm.
in a similar situation. We have been in a similar situation with liquid cooling over the past years.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now is that change in mindset where people start understanding and grasping the reality around liquid cooling, not because they suddenly are educated, but because hey, it's becoming more common. It's less scary. It's being deployed in certain quantities. There's almost every major data center organization is piloting with all the technologies, as already being exposed to all the technologies. Some deployments are already done at scale. So people are getting more comfortable and are getting more ready for this new reality. And people are, most importantly, I think people are starting to realize how it's actually not more complicated when it comes to data center infrastructure, how it's actually providing more opportunities
Yeah.
for efficiency in ways that in the past were perceived as super complex. Oh, why would you do this? Well, if you get exposed to it, you realize that how come we've actually ever accepted that complexity of air cooling?
Mm.
I hearing that
Mhm.
more and more often these days
Yeah.
than 5 or 6 years ago,
I
and
was
that's a good indication of a significant industry mindset shift.
Yeah, I was in a like a contained air, pretty high dense, portion of a data hall a few weeks ago, and it was like, oh my gosh, like it was so hot and so loud you couldn't even hear yourself. It was nuts. It was nuts, and yeah, I mean, it was accomplishing it, but yeah, so interesting. Well, this probably leads to my next question, which is, what factors do you think will drive immersion cooling in the future, and where do you see it in 5 years?
Right. So to again, fantastic question. So let me start with where I see it in 5 years. And let me take you to a different part of the liquid cooling industry first. So if we look at cold plate, cold plate has always been a couple of years ahead
Mhm.
of immersion, right? And it's still the case. This year is marks a significant year for cold plate as a technology, because this is the year where cold plates are being embedded in server designs, are being integrated within server designs. We're already seeing the first servers coming to market with cold plate technology pre-built in. That
Mm.
is a massive, massive step. It means that cold plate is at the verge of being commoditized, and it also means that it's now at that pivot point of becoming mainstream.
Mm.
So 2023, 2024 is the period for cold plate to be mainstream.
Mhm.
After that, we'll see. At mainstream doesn't mean that every server will have a cold plate option. Like I said, it's not like liquid cooling is going to take over the entire industry, but it's going to be mainstream as part of certain platforms will simply be available, readily available with cold plates and connectors and plugs on the rear for
Mhm.
to be blind mated on the rear end, or to have these hose plugs on the end, right, so that people can readily adopt it. Immersion is going to be a few years behind. Why is that? Because immersion is lacking a lot of the industry standards that cold plate has now been able to generate to help the industry move forward with the cold plate technology. It's not that immersion is lagging because technology is inferior or anything like that. It's because the necessity of immersion is simply comes after cold plate. Right,
Mhm.
cold plate is able to deal with specific hotspots, specific chips. Yes, there are technologies out there that can cover the entire mainboard. However, from a practical and cost perspective, that is just not a future that is currently being seen as reasonable. And that's where that holistic approach that immersion brings is going to become essential. Also in combination with cold plate technology. right? So right now you see cold plate technology being rolled out with door heat exchangers. A significant amount of heat is still being generated by components other than the CPUs and GPUs.
Mm-hmm.
And that still needs to be cooled down, and that's currently most often being done with the door heat exchangers. That function of a door heat exchanger to cool this equipment is something that I do see being taken over by immersion. Whether or not the main chips are going to be cooled by the immersion technology, or whether that's going to be a combination with cold plates, I don't really care. It's the holistic nature that the combination addresses, or immersion by itself addresses. The standards still need to be generated, though. And that's something that, as you know, we're working hard on within Open Compute. It's not going as fast as it could if we were operating as a commercial company where we could pay the people in the community. But hey, this is volunteer communities. Everything needs to be consensus driven, so that it just takes time. That's always the case with these kind of platforms, and it takes longer than everybody would like it to take, but it's essential work that is being done. And my estimate is that it will take about three more years before we have some good settled standards. Maybe not all driven by OCP, but at least OCP is one of the driving forces behind the creation of it. I will be expecting other industry platforms, also like ASHRAE and IEC, to follow suit and start defining certain items that are critical for immersion to flourish. So where do I see immersion in 5 years? I see immersion in 5 years in a similar stage as currently cold plate. In terms of that pivot point to be mainstream, where it's going to be just normal to walk into a data center and see an immersion tank instead of something special. Where you don't need to have these explicit locations where there's 1 or 2 or maybe 5 tanks, but you see these big lineups in combination with other technologies. I never, even in my commercial engagements as a consultant, I never go towards the winner domain, because no technology will be a winner as such, because it's, like I said, it's a coexistence, coexisting future, I believe. And if I look at the industry projections, the market projections, that show something similar as well. One major difference between immersion and cold plate in terms of market valuation: immersion technology is getting more revenue in because you're dealing at rack scale versus cold plate. So if you look at industry projections, what we're seeing is that this year and about 2024, 2025, I do expect immersion to overtake the revenue projections from cold plate. But it doesn't mean that immersion is going to have a bigger market. To the contrary, it's still going to be well behind cold plate in terms of market, the amount of users, amount of systems that are going to be cooled with the technology. It's a bit more complicated to explain, but that's something I'll be getting into in some other forums as well.
Some more papers coming up. I think I agree. Obviously, I always feel like the future of immersion is kind of held in the OEM's hands at this point, right? So, but someone said dog years. Data centers work in dog years, which is 1 for every 7, right? So I like that. I grabbed on. I was like, yeah, I think we're in those dog year stages right now, where it's going to escalate really fast, and it's so exciting to watch. And it's exciting for me to talk to some of the players that are very committed to this technology and really are seeing it escalate. It's exciting to see projects deployed. I just recently saw a 1.2 megawatt project for full immersion deployed. So amazing, so exciting. So yeah, but well, I got one last question, and so it's kind of a weird one. But what's the one question that you wish I'd asked that I did not ask? So yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I think I already spilled the beans on that one, didn't I? What was the one question I wish you had asked? Well, I didn't know in advance that you were going to ask this, and I accidentally spent
Thank
quite a bit of time on exactly that. Um, I think if we're looking at what the industry needs, what we need as an industry is collaboration. One of the worst things you can have in an industry like this is confidentiality. It's an emerging technology to gain the confidence
Yeah,
of the industry, of the market, that you need to buy and buy into the technology that we're representing. You cannot hold things back. People need to have full access to the good and the bad. One of the things that I feel is really missing in the industry at the moment is the sharing of the bad. If you look at the airline industry, for example, every airline crash, every plane crash gets a lot of attention, and it's being investigated, and the outcome is published and is published on, and it allows the industry to improve.
mm,
Right now, there is still a lot of gossip, rumors, things that are remaining hidden because companies don't want to be associated with failures. When it comes, if an IT platform has been affected, or whether there's been a leak or even fire instances, instead of bringing it in as a lesson learned. So, hey, we had this instance, this and this happened, and this was the cause. We want to share this so the whole industry can become aware that this is a failure that you should be expecting if you don't pay attention to X, Y, Z.
yeah,
We can take it in with the immersion requirements. That is something I'm really, really missing. We've tried to address that with the immersion hurdles, now called immersion challenges community, which you're familiar with yourself as well. Trying to get in all the reasons, try to get attention to all the reasons why you would not want to have immersion, and in that way shining light on the areas where we need to put in more work, or help drive the industry towards further improvements.
hmm,
I feel that this is something that the industry really needs to pay more attention to. We need to have more horror stories, but not with the purpose of scaring people away from the domain, but by
fixing it.
uh, to help us all fix it,
Yeah, yeah,
instead of keeping things behind closed doors and allowing others to make the mistakes that you've made. Because eventually it will rub off on the entire industry. It will slow down the adoption. It will slow down the standards creation, because and it will because people will not be able to incorporate everything. And if you have standards that don't provide enough safety, or provide enough underlying structure to help achieve the high availability and the high safety environment, it's going to be a risk, right? It's going to take more time before you reach that end. That also is driven by the sense that, hey, companies feel that that all that matters is their own success, and very often they overlook the necessity for an industry-wide success.
hmm, yeah,
You can have your success in a very small industry, or you can focus on collectively growing the industry. Maybe you risk losing a couple of percent points of market share by sharing some things, but those couple of percent points of market share are going to be of a much bigger pie, a
mm,
much bigger market. So even under the bottom line, you're going to be much better off by sharing your insights, sharing your views.
mm,
Again, coming back to the OCP mission, I would love to see more of that OCP mission being truly understood and
yeah.
pursued by the industry, and I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, unfortunately, I even heard recently someone has a misunderstanding about the OCP immersion community. They said, "Well, isn't it about the OCP IT equipment?" And I said, "No, no, no. It's way more than that." So, and that's funny that their perception was aligning to that. But yeah, no, I do think to say that about yours, and we'll wrap it up here, is what you were saying. I think that those keeping things under wraps is pretty a broad stroke in the data center industry. I mean, if there's an incident, we rarely hear about it, right? I mean, and so in general, I think that's just people, CYA, right? And I recently heard something too that I grab onto, that no one has ever lost their job for being more energy efficient, but they certainly have lost their job for something to go down, right? So that is, that spoke to me. Okay, all right. Well, so, and this is the hard work that the OCP immersion community is doing, Liquid and Immersion community, don't fear liquid cooling, plan for it, right? And that is just resonates right there, is that we got to do it right. People say, well, why is it taking immersion cooling so long to, well, you know what? This is not something you can just throw out there and hope that works. You really need to plan for it, and make all those, make the mistakes, address the mistakes, and learn from it, like you said. So I do think we're at an important precipice right now, right?
Yeah, and come to that. It's just one more remark I wanted to make. Because also what something that you just mentioned, why is immersion taking so long? It resembles other comments, also anticipating a ceiling of immersion based on what technology is capable of today. Think back to the comparison I made earlier with electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
That it would take half a day for a vehicle to charge up based on the range that you would need. That's what was considered 15 years ago, right?
Huh.
And if we're now looking at what is possible with getting these batteries charged in 15 minutes with 800 kilometers range, or what is it, 500 miles range in 15 minutes, that is just people need to be aware that also with immersion, the immersion itself is an innovation, but the innovation curve within immersion has barely even started.
Yeah.
So whatever you're projecting based on the technology status of today, of what the technology is doing today, what immersion is doing today is based on equipment that is available today. Tomorrow's equipment is very often not even available to the immersion solution providers. To an extent it is, but also to an extent it isn't. You will not see the actual innovations within the immersion ecosystem until the systems are there that need to be covered. And it's easy to draw conclusions based on what is possible today. But if that were the true mindset and the true way that innovation works, we would have never arrived on the moon.
Yeah.
We would have never driven cars. We would have never had made any advancements in society. And this is what society does. We've been breaking the ceiling with air cooling for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
Or for the last 10 years at the very least, right? Immersion hasn't started breaking any ceilings yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're about to start, and think about the long way that they still have ahead of them when we're talking about immersion. And the same goes for cold plate. The same goes for anything else that is new technology.
I agree. Well, I love that you grabbed this time with me, and so it's been so important to uplift OCP. And I also love that we're starting to see OCP do, presentations at 7x24 and AFCOM, right? Their data cloud next week. So they're really starting to get out there, and again, don't fear liquid, plan for it, and I love that messaging. So, well, thank you so much, Rolf. You are,
absolutely welcome.
You're the OG of immersion cooling. I love that. So yeah. And so
thank you so much.
Oh, of course. So we'll talk soon again, and thank you again.
All right. Thank you too, and speak soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.